She had my father's truck towed from my own driveway, then signed a form calling it HOA fire access. Carol Whitman, the HOA president, stood across the street with her clipboard while a tow truck dragged my old Ford F-250 off the same driveway. My father helped me pour 20 years earlier. The truck was registered, insured, parked fully inside my deeded lot. But by noon, the impound yard wanted $385 plus $75 a day because Carol had marked it as an abandoned vehicle blocking HOA access. I did not yell. I did not chase the driver. I did not argue with her in the street. I pulled up my doorbell camera footage. At 5:58 that morning, it recorded the tow driver asking Carol whether the truck was on HOA property or private property, and it recorded the answer that turned her clipboard into evidence. By the next HOA meeting, Carol was not explaining my truck. She was explaining her signature. Let me back up.
I can explain this signature.
My name is Michael Turner, but most people on Maple Ridge Drive call me Mike. I am 59 years old, retired after 27 years working on diesel engines for the county, and I live with my wife Linda in a one-story brick house near the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in Maple Ridge Estates. Maple Ridge was not a luxury neighborhood. It was just neat. Matching mailboxes, trimmed lawns, a clubhouse nobody used except for board meetings and birthday parties, an HOA that sent too many emails about mulch color and trash cans, but for the most part, people left each other alone. At least they used to. Linda and I bought the house because it had three things I wanted: a wide driveway, a detached garage, and enough room for the old Ford. The truck was a dark green 1999 Ford F-250, faded hood, small dent over the rear wheel well, 184,000 miles on the odometer. It was not pretty the way new trucks are pretty, but it was clean, registered, insured, and fully operational. It had been my father's truck. Earl Turner bought it used, drove it for years, and treated it better than some people treat new cars. He hauled lumber in it, gravel fence posts, garage shelves, and once a used table saw he swore only needed 10 minutes and a better cord. When Linda and I added the detached garage behind the house 20 years earlier, my father showed up every Saturday morning in that Ford, with 2 thermoses of coffee and a red metal socket set behind the seat. He helped me frame the walls. He helped me pour the driveway extension. He left that socket set in the truck the last time he drove it over, and after he passed, I never took it out. So when Carol Whitman had that truck towed, she did not just take an old vehicle out of my driveway. She put a hook on one of the last working things my father left me and dragged it across concrete he helped me pour. The deed to the house was in a fireproof box in the hallway closet. So was the closing packet, the subdivision plat, and the survey page showing the concrete where the truck sat fully inside Lot 42. I had not looked at those pages in years. A driveway is one of those things you assume you should not have to defend. Carol Whitman made me wrong about that. Carol was the HOA president at the time. Late 50s, silver blonde hair always tucked behind one ear, sunglasses even on cloudy mornings, and a clipboard she carried like it was part of her job title. She did not like my truck. She never said it was unsafe. She never said it leaked oil. She never said the tags were expired, because they were not. She called it inconsistent with neighborhood appearance. The first notice came in April. It was inside a clear plastic sleeve, taped to the mailbox post with blue painter S tape. The paper had the Maple Ridge Estates logo at the top and Carol S initials at the bottom. It said, "Vehicle appearance violation. Commercial style truck visible from street." I read it twice, then walked outside and looked at the Ford. No company logo, no ladder rack, no trailer, no tools in the bed, no broken windows, no flat tires, just an older pickup parked on a private driveway. I emailed the property management company that afternoon. I asked for the specific covenant section, the hearing procedure, and clarification on whether the rule applied to vehicles parked entirely on deeded lots. I attached 4 photos: the license plate, the driveway, the truck sitting behind the sidewalk line, and the empty street in front of the house. The management company did not answer. Carol did. Her email was 4 sentences long. "Mr. Turner, the board expects voluntary compliance. Continued refusal to correct the violation may result in further enforcement. The community standards are clear. Please govern yourself accordingly." No section number, no hearing date, no explanation. Just official sounding language sitting where a real rule should have been. Linda read it over my shoulder and said, "She wants you to argue with her," I said. "Then she can wait." I did not argue. I kept the Ford clean. I parked it on the right side of the driveway, 3 feet behind the sidewalk. I kept the registration current. I saved Carol S. notice in a folder in the kitchen drawer. My father used to say, "A man can be wrong loud, Mike. Paper is quiet, but it lasts longer." I did not know yet how much paper Carol was about to give me. She came by twice in May the first time I was edging the lawn. She stopped at the bottom of the driveway and said the truck had become a recurring compliance concern. The second time, I was replacing a hinge on the side gate. She pointed at the Ford and said, "This community has standards." I looked at the tires, then at the concrete beneath them. "So do property lines," I said. Carol smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind people use when they have stopped trying to persuade you and started planning around you. The tow happened on a Thursday morning. Linda had a dental appointment at 10. I planned to take her, then stop at the hardware store for garage door rollers. I came into the kitchen at 6:30, poured coffee, and looked through the front window the way I did every morning. The driveway looked too empty. For a second, my mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe I had pulled the Ford into the garage. Maybe Linda had moved her car. Maybe I was looking at the wrong side of the driveway. Then I saw the black marks on the concrete. The truck was gone. I set the coffee down without drinking it and walked outside in my slippers. The air was cool. A sprinkler clicked somewhere down the street. A school bus turned at the far corner. Everything around me looked normal, which made the empty driveway feel worse. 2 dark drag marks curved near the lower edge of the concrete. There was a fresh scrape where the tow chain or wheel lift had caught the surface. The Ford had not been driven away, it had been pulled. Carol came out of her house across the street. Before I had even finished looking at the marks, she wore white walking shoes, a pale blue cardigan, and oversized sunglasses. Her clipboard was tucked under one arm. "You were warned, Mike," she said. I looked at her, then back at the driveway. "We can let one ugly truck drag down the whole neighborhood," she added. Linda opened the front door behind me. She looked at the empty space and said quietly, "Where is your father's truck?" Linda put one hand on the doorframe and did not move for a few seconds. That hurt worse than Carol's tone. I did not cross the street. I did not raise my voice. I asked one question. "Who authorized the tow?" Carol lifted her clipboard slightly. "The HOA did. From my driveway, from a visible violation area." That was the first lie she told me in person. Not the biggest one. Just the first. I went back inside and called Rockwell Recovery, the tow company Carol finally named after. I asked twice. "The woman at the yard found the truck by plate number?" "Yes, sir. It was brought in at 6:24 this morning. HOA authorization." "What was the reason listed?" She paused, then read it exactly. "Abandoned vehicle blocking HOA fire access." I repeated it back. "Abandoned?" "Yes, sir. Blocking fire access, that is what the authorization says. The release fee was $385 if I picked it up that day. Storage would start the next morning at $75 per day." I looked through the kitchen window at the empty driveway. "My father's socket set is still behind that seat," I said. Before I could stop myself, the woman went quiet for half a second. Then she said, more softly, "I am sorry, sir. I can only go by the paperwork." That sentence mattered. Paperwork. I wrote down the fee, the time, the tow yard address, and the name of the person I spoke with. Then, I opened the Doorbell camera app. Linda had bought the camera 2 years earlier, after someone stole a package from the porch. I installed it above the front door and mostly forgot about it. Except when it caught raccoons crossing the walkway or Carol walking up to tape another notice to the mailbox. I scrolled back to 5:58 a.m. Carol's white SUV pulled to the curb across from my house with its headlights off. 30 seconds later, the tow truck rolled into frame. The driver got out first. Heavyset man, gray beard, orange safety vest. He walked up the driveway slowly, looked at the Ford, looked at the house, then turned back to Carol. The camera picked up the audio clearly enough. He asked, "Is this HOA property or private property?" Carol stepped onto my driveway. "Not the street, not the sidewalk. My driveway," she pointed at the Ford. "It's under association enforcement," she said. The driver hesitated. "Because it looks like a private driveway." Carol handed him a sheet of paper. "I am the HOA president, I authorize it. Not, I have a court order. Not, this is common property. Not, here is the owner's consent. Just that I am the HOA president." The driver looked at the paper, looked back at the truck, then started hooking up the Ford. 6 minutes later, my father's truck was being pulled backward out of the driveway, while Carol stood beside the tow truck, with her clipboard pressed to her chest. Linda watched the footage over my shoulder. When the truck disappeared from the frame, neither of us spoke for a while. Then she said, "Mike," she knew. I nodded, because that was the part that mattered. The driver had asked the question. The camera had recorded it, and Carol had answered anyway. I saved the clip to my phone. Then I saved it to my laptop. Then I emailed a copy to myself. Then I took screenshots. Carol stepping onto the driveway, Carol pointing at the Ford, the tow driver holding the paper, and the truck leaving my property. I printed the clearest screenshot and wrote the date and time at the bottom. Then, I opened the kitchen drawer, took out the folder with Carol's notices, and placed the screenshot on top. I did not call her. I did not post the video online. I did not stand in the street and argue with the HOA president. Not yet. Carol thought she had removed an eyesore. What she had really done was create a tow record, leave marks on my driveway, and put herself on camera turning private property into HOA fire access with one sentence. By the time the sun came fully over Maple Ridge Estates, my father's truck was behind a locked fence at Rockwell Recovery, but Carol's problem was already saved in 3 places. Because the camera had recorded the question, and more importantly, it had recorded the answer, Carol thought her clipboard could hide. The first thing I learned that morning was that getting a truck towed is easy when someone is willing to sign the wrong paper. Getting it back is harder. Rockwell Recovery sat on the edge of town, behind a chain-link fence with plastic strips woven through it so you could not see much from the road. I drove there in Linda's car just after 8. Linda wanted to come with me. I told her no, not because I wanted to handle it alone, because I knew if she saw my father's truck sitting behind a fence like some abandoned junker, it would hurt her in a way neither of us needed that morning. The office was a small beige building with a window unit humming in the wall and a tired bell over the door. A young woman behind the counter asked for the plate number. I gave it to her. She typed for a moment, then looked at the screen the way people do when the computer says something awkward. Yes, sir. Dark green Ford, HOA removal. Release amount is $385. I want a copy of the tow ticket and the authorization. I can print the receipt if you pay, she said. The authorization has to come through the property owner or the HOA contact. I am the property owner. She looked back at the screen. On our form, the property owner is listed as Maple Ridge Estates HOA. That tightened something in my chest, not rage, something colder. The feeling you get when a person writes a lie in a box and expects the box to make it true. That truck was taken from my driveway, I said. Her voice softened. I understand, sir. Well, I'm just telling you what the paperwork says. There it was again. Paperwork I paid because every day I left the truck there added $75, and my father's socket set was still behind the seat. But before I folded my copy of the receipt, I wrote 2 words across the bottom in blue ink paid under protest. Under reason for tow, the receipt said, abandoned vehicle blocking HOA fire access. Under location, it said, Maple Ridge Common Drive. It did not mention my address. It did not mention my driveway. It did not mention Lot 42. It turned my private concrete into common property with 12 typed words. When they brought the Ford around, I stood beside Linda's car and watched it roll toward me. Same faded hood, same dent over the wheel. Well, same old bug marks on the windshield. But there was a scrape along the lower front valance where the tow gear had caught it, and the steering wheel was turned hard left, like someone had forced the wheels before lifting it. I opened the driver's door. The socket set was still there. That should have made me feel better, it did not. I drove home slowly, listening for every sound. Maybe the truck had always pulled a little left. Maybe. I only noticed it because someone else had put hands on it. When I turned onto Maple Ridge Drive, Carol was outside again. Of course she was. This time she had company. Brandon, from 3 houses down, stood near her mailbox, looking like he wished he had stayed inside. Mrs. Alvarez, who lived across from the clubhouse, stood a few feet away with her arms folded. Carol watched me park the Ford in the exact same spot on my driveway. I stepped out. She crossed her arms. You should be careful, Mike, she said. Retrieving the vehicle does not cure the violation. It was towed from my driveway. It was towed pursuant to HOA enforcement. Where is the fire access? Her mouth tightened. That is not something I am required to debate on the street. Brandon looked down at his shoes. Mrs. Alvarez looked straight at Carol. You told my son the same thing about his car last month. Carol turned toward her. That was a separate matter. You said driveways are enforceable if the car is visible from the street. Mrs. Alvarez did not raise her voice, but Carol heard it like an accusation. For half a second, Carol's face changed. Then the board president expression came back. Further discussion should go through the board. I said, good. That afternoon, an email arrived from Maple Ridge Estates HOA, subject line, notice of continuing non-compliance and hostile conduct. I opened it at the kitchen table with Linda standing behind me. The letter said, my truck remained in violation of community vehicle standards. It said my conduct toward the HOA president had been confrontational. It said the board reserved the right to levy additional fines, restrict amenity access, and pursue further enforcement. At the bottom in bold, failure to comply within 7 days may result in additional penalties. Linda read it once, then she said, they took your truck and called you hostile? I did not answer right away. I was looking for the rule. There was no rule number, no section, no page, no quote from the CCRS, just more official sounding language where real authority should have been. I printed the email, put it behind the tow receipt, and wrote the time at the top. Then I called the sheriff's office, non-emergency line. Deputy Aaron Blake arrived just before 4. He was in his early 40s. Calm voice, clean uniform, the kind of deputy who did not seem interested in being dragged into a neighborhood fight, but knew better than to dismiss one too quickly. Carol saw the patrol car and came outside before he reached my porch. That told me something. Deputy Blake asked if we could speak one at a time. Carol stopped at the edge of my driveway with a folder under one arm. Deputy, this is an HOA enforcement issue. Mr. Turner has been repeatedly non-compliant. The deputy nodded politely. I'll speak with everyone. I am starting with the vehicle owner. That made Carol quiet. Not happy. Just quiet. I showed him the driveway marks first, then the tow receipt, then the HOA email, then I pulled up the doorbell clip. He watched without interrupting. He saw Carol step onto my driveway. He heard the tow driver ask, "Is this HOA property or private property?" He heard Carol answer, "I am the HOA president. I authorize it," when the video ended. He looked at the driveway, then back at my phone. "Do you have the actual tow authorization form?" he asked. "Not yet. The tow company says I have to get it from the HOA." Carol stepped closer. "That form is an internal enforcement document." Deputy Blake turned toward her. "I am not asking for board deliberations. I am asking for the document used to remove his vehicle." Carol's jaw moved slightly. "I can provide it to the board." "Not the board," he said. "I am documenting a complaint." She did not hand it over right away. Instead, she pulled out a copy of the HOA vehicle standards. One line was highlighted. "Unsightly vehicles visible from common areas." Deputy Blake read it. Then he asked a simple question. "Does this say you can tow from his driveway?" Carol said. "The HOA has broad enforcement authority." The deputy looked at the page again. "That is not what I asked for." The first time all day, Carol had no quick sentence ready finally. She pulled out a one-page form. Maple Ridge Estates Vehicle Removal Authorization. She held it for a second, too long, before handing it to Deputy Blake. Like the paper might say less if she controlled who touched it. Deputy Blake read it silently. Then he read one line out loud. Location, Ho Common Drive/fire access. He looked at my driveway, then at Carol, then at me. "Mr. Turner, is this driveway part of your lot?" "Yes." "Do you have your deed or plat?" "I do." I went inside and brought out the closing packet from the fireproof box. Not the whole thing, just the deed page, the subdivision plat, and the survey sheet showing Lot 42. Deputy Blake did not pretend to be a judge. He did not say this settles it. He did not arrest Carol on my lawn. He did what a careful deputy should do. He took notes. He photographed the driveway marks. He wrote down the tow receipt number. He noted that the HOA tow form described the location as common drive or fire access, while I had presented documents showing the vehicle had been on a private residential driveway. When he lowered the form, I asked, "Do you mind if I photograph that location line for my records?" Carol looked like she wanted to say no. Deputy Blake said, "She's already presented it here, so I took one clear photo of the line that mattered: location, HOA Common Drive/fire access." Then Deputy Blake gave me an incident number. "This may end up being civil," he said, "but the location discrepancy is worth documenting. I'd request the HOA towing policy, the towing contract, any board authorization, and the full form from the tow company. Keep the video in its original format." Carol folded her arms. "So he gets to ignore the rules?" Deputy Blake looked at her. "No one said that. But rules and towing authority are not the same thing." That sentence stayed with me. Rules and towing authority are not the same thing. Carol hated it because it drew a line between what she wanted to enforce and what she had the power to do. Before the deputy left, he asked Carol one more question. "Was the vehicle blocking a marked fire lane?" Carol said, "It was obstructing community standards." "That is not a fire lane," he said. She did not answer. After the patrol car pulled away, Carol stood at the end of my driveway for a moment longer. Then she said, low enough that Linda could not hear from the doorway, but loud enough for me, "You are making this much harder than it needs to be." I looked at the clipboard in her hand. "No," I said, "I am making it documented." She left without another word. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder, open tow receipt, HOA email, doorbell screenshots, Deputy Blake's incident number photo of the tow form location line, the deed, the plat. Linda set a plate of reheated meatloaf beside me and pulled out the chair across from mine. "You okay?" she asked. I looked toward the driveway, where the Ford sat under the porch light. "I will be," I said. But the truth was I was not okay yet, not because of the money, not even because of the scrape. Because Carol had looked at my driveway, heard the tow driver question it, signed a form calling it fire access, and then told the neighborhood I was the problem. That is what people like Carol count on. They count on you getting embarrassed, they count on you paying the fee, they count on you deciding it is easier to swallow the lie than to pull the file. So I pulled the file, And what I found inside did not just challenge Carol's authority, it took it apart. And on the first page of the HOA towing policy, I found the sentence Carol should have read before sunrise. It was not hidden, it was not in tiny print. It was right there under the heading, authorized towing locations. I read it once, then I read it again. Towing enforcement is limited to association-owned streets, common parking areas, guest parking spaces, marked fire lanes, and designated no parking zones. I sat back in the kitchen chair and looked through the window at my driveway. The Ford was parked under the porch light, exactly where it had been before Carol had it dragged away. Not on an association-owned street, not in common parking, not in guest parking, not in a marked fire lane, not in a designated no parking zone. My driveway, lot 42, the same concrete my father helped me pour. Linda was drying a plate at the sink when she saw my face. What did you find? I turned the policy toward her and pointed to the sentence. She read it slowly. Then she said, so they had their own rule, and she still did it. That was the part that stayed with me. Carol had not acted because the rules were unclear. She had acted because she thought nobody would read them. I printed the page and put it behind the photograph of the tow form location line. Then I kept reading. 2 pages later, I found the second sentence that mattered. Violations involving vehicles parked on private residential lots shall be addressed through written notice and hearing procedures, unless the vehicle presents an immediate safety hazard. I underlined private residential lots, then hearing procedures, then immediate safety hazard. There had been no hearing, no emergency board meeting, no marked fire lane, no blocked hydrant, no immediate safety hazard. Just Carol, before sunrise, turning a private driveway into HOA fire access because the paper needed it to be true. I did not sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was trying to keep my anger from making decisions for me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Ford being pulled backward out of the driveway. I saw Carol standing there with her clipboard. I heard Linda asking, "Where is your father's truck?" Around 2 in the morning, I went to the garage. The Ford sat there in the dark, the hood dull under the overhead light. I opened the driver's door and touched the red metal socket set behind the seat. For a second, I was not 59 years old, I was 28, standing beside my father while he showed me how to keep my thumb out of the way when tightening a stubborn bolt. He used to say, "Don't rush when metal is under pressure, that S when things snap." I closed the door quietly. That was good advice for more than engines. The next morning, I started the binder, not a folder anymore. A binder on the front, I wrote Maple Ridge Tow Lot 42. I made tabs, tab 1, doorbell footage, tab 2, tow receipt, tab 3, tow authorization location line, tab 4, deed and subdivision plat, tab 5, HOA towing policy, tab 6, vehicle standards, tab 7, Deputy Blake incident number, tab 8, HOA emails, tab 9, damage photos. It looked excessive sitting on the kitchen table. Then, I remembered Carol had already towed my father's truck from my driveway and called me hostile for asking why. Excessive was not the problem. Unprepared was. I was not enjoying any of it. I was tired. Linda was tired. The truck was back, but the day had left something ugly sitting in the house with us. I just knew that if Carol wanted to make this about paperwork, I could not afford to be careless with mine. At 8:17 a.m., I emailed the property management company. I requested 4 things: the complete tow authorization form, the HOA towing contract with Rockwell Recovery, any board vote or written approval authorizing the tow of my truck, any map, plat, resolution, or recorded document identifying my driveway as HOA common property, fire access, or a tow authorized zone. I attached the tow receipt and 1 screenshot from the doorbell camera. I did not attach the video. Not yet. At 9:06, Carol replied from her HOA president email, not management. Carol, Mr. Turner, your continued attempts to challenge lawful enforcement are inappropriate. The board considers this matter closed unless and until the vehicle is removed from view. I read that sentence twice. Matter closed, vehicle removed from view, no documents attached, no policy citation, no board vote, just Carol trying to shut the door before I reached the room where the records were kept. At 9:22, the management company finally responded. The email was from Denise Porter, the community manager. I had never met her. Her tone was polite in the way people sound when a problem has moved from annoying to expensive. Mr. Turner, we are reviewing your request and will provide available records after consultation with the board. Available records after consultation. I printed both emails. Tab 8 got thicker. By noon, Carol sent another notice. Final compliance demand. It added a $250 fine for continued vehicle appearance violation and a separate $150 fine for disruptive conduct toward the association president. Linda read that one standing beside the table. She fined you for asking questions? She fined me for asking questions. She can answer, I said. Linda sat down across from me for a while. Neither of us spoke. Then she touched the edge of the binder. Your dad would have hated this, I know, but he would have liked the tabs. That made me laugh once, even though I did not feel like laughing. By Friday afternoon, Denise sent the first batch of documents. The towing contract came as a PDF. I printed it and read it with a yellow highlighter. The contract was plain enough. Rockwell Recovery was authorized to tow vehicles from association-owned roads, common parking areas, guest spaces, marked fire lanes, and other areas specifically designated in writing by the association. Then came the sentence I circled twice. Residential driveways and privately owned lots are excluded unless removal is requested by the lot owner, law enforcement, court order, or verified emergency access requirement. I stared at that line for a long time. Carol had not just violated my understanding of the rule. She had violated the contract the HOA signed with the tow company. That mattered, because Rockwell had relied on her authorization, and Carol had written the one location that made the tow look allowed. Maple Ridge Common Drive, fire access. I emailed Denise again. Please provide any document verifying that the driveway at my address is a marked fire lane, common drive, or emergency access area. Denise did not say Carol was wrong. She did not say the tow was unauthorized. She only wrote one sentence that mattered. Management has located no map or recorded document identifying the driveway at your address as association common property or a marked fire lane. A second line mattered just as much. Management has not located meeting minutes, an emergency board vote, or written board approval authorizing a tow from the driveway at this address. I read both lines out loud to Linda. She put her coffee down. She actually wrote that? She did. I printed it. Tab 11. No fire lane record, no board authorization that afternoon. My phone rang from a number I did not know. This is Jim from Rockwell Recovery, the man said. I was the driver on your Ford. I stepped out onto the back patio. Yes, sir. Our office forwarded your records request, he said. Your number was on the release receipt. I wanted to make sure you knew. I asked her before I hooked it. I know the camera recorded it. There was a pause. She told me it was under HOA authority. She did. I've towed from Maple Ridge before, Jim said, mostly street parking, guest spaces, fire lane jobs near the clubhouse. I don't like taking cars out of driveways, unless the owner calls or police call. That's why, I asked. His voice was not defensive. It was tired, like a man realizing someone had used him to do the wrong thing. Did you write that down? I asked in the driver notes. He said, I wrote contact confirmed HOA authorization after private driveway question. Another piece of paper Carol had not counted on. Can I get a copy of that note? You'll probably have to request it through the office, he said, but it exists. After we hung up, I wrote down the call time, Jim's name, and the exact words I remembered. Then I emailed Rockwell Recovery requesting the driver note. By Monday morning, they sent it one line. Driver asked HOA contact if vehicle was on private driveway. HOA contact confirmed authority and signed removal form. I printed it. Tab 12. Driver note. By then, the binder did not feel excessive anymore. It felt like weight. The kind of weight paper gets when every page answers a lie. Carol had a clipboard. I had the policy. She had a tow form. I had the doorbell footage. She had written fire access. I had the management company saying there was no fire lane record. She had called me hostile. I had Deputy Blake's incident number and the driver's note proving he asked. First on Tuesday, Carol made her next mistake. She sent a neighborhood email, not just to me, to the whole Maple Ridge community list. Subject line. Community standards and vehicle compliance. She did not use my name, but everyone knew who she meant. The email said certain residents were attempting to undermine lawful HOA enforcement by mischaracterizing private violations as property rights disputes. I read that sentence in the garage with the Ford beside me. Mischaracterizing. That was Carol's word. By dinner, 2 neighbors had already stopped waving. One texted Linda and asked if everything was okay with the HOA. Linda read it twice, then set the phone face down on the table. That was the part Carol wanted. Not just the fine, not just the tow, the embarrassment. For a minute I wanted to reply all. I wanted to attach the video. I wanted every person on Maple Ridge Drive to hear the tow driver ask whether it was private property. But I did not yet. I printed Carol's email 13, public statement. Then I wrote one sentence on a yellow sticky note and placed it on the front of the binder. Let her keep talking. Because by then I understood something my father had tried to teach me years ago. A person who is wrong and quiet can sometimes walk away. A person who is wrong and keeps writing things down is building the record against themselves. Carol was still writing, and the next place she planned to do it was the HOA board meeting. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at 7. Carol had chosen the clubhouse. Of course she had. The clubhouse was where she liked to perform authority, folding chairs in rows. A long plastic table at the front, a small American flag in the corner, a corkboard covered with notices about pool hours, landscaping rules, and community reminders nobody read until they were in trouble. Linda asked if I wanted her to come. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I had spent 3 days telling myself this was about documents, policy, and a tow form. But when you are walking into a room where your neighbors have been told you are the problem, it helps to have someone beside you who knows the truth before you open the binder. We arrived 10 minutes early. Carol was already at the front table. She wore a cream blazer, pearl earrings, and the same oversized sunglasses, pushed up on her head even though we were indoors. Her clipboard sat in front of her. So did a neat stack of papers. She looked at the binder under my arm and smiled like she thought I had brought homework to a fight she had already graded. Brandon sat in the back row. Mrs. Alvarez sat 2 seats from him. Denise Porter, the property manager, was present on a laptop screen at the end of the table. The board attorney, Paul Sutter, was on speakerphone. I knew that because there was a yellow legal pad beside the phone with his name written at the top. That told me the board already knew this was not just about an old truck. Board member David Ellis sat beside Carol with a packet open in front of him and reading glasses low on his nose. David was not one of Carol's friends. He was the kind of board member who actually read the packet before a meeting and asked questions nobody enjoyed answering. Carol opened with the usual script. Approval of minutes, landscaping update, pool maintenance. Then she moved to what she called vehicle compliance and resident conduct. She did not say my name at first. She did not have to. Certain residents, Carol said, have recently attempted to reframe ordinary enforcement actions as property rights disputes. This board cannot allow individual homeowners to undermine community standards simply because they dislike the outcome. A few people glanced back at me. Linda reached over and touched my wrist under the binder, not to stop me, to steady me. Carol continued. The vehicle in question remains visible from the street and continues to violate our standards. The tow was performed under association authority. That was when I raised my hand. Carol saw it and looked annoyed before she remembered. There were witnesses. Open comment will come later. Mr. Turner. David Ellis leaned toward the microphone. Carol, since this agenda item concerns his vehicle, I think we should let him respond. Carol's smile tightened. Fine, 3 minutes. I stood up with the binder. I will not need 3 minutes to explain whether my driveway is a fire lane, I said. The room got quiet. I walked to the front, but not too close. I did not want to look like I was crowding anyone. I placed 4 papers on the table. The tow receipt, the tow authorization location line, the subdivision plat showing lot 42, and the driver note from Rockwell Recovery. Then I said, my truck was towed from my private driveway at 5:58 in the morning. The tow form described the location as Maple Ridge Common Drive/fire access. David picked up the form. Carol said, that document is being taken out of context. I opened the binder to the towing policy. This is the HOA towing policy. I read the sentence slowly. Towing enforcement is limited to association-owned streets, common parking areas, guest parking spaces, marked fire lanes, and designated no parking zones. Then I looked at the board. My driveway is none of those. Carol leaned forward. The vehicle was visible from common areas. I turned 1 page. This is the vehicle section. It says vehicles on private residential lots must be handled by notice and hearing unless there is an immediate safety hazard. I set down the next page. This is the towing contract with Rockwell Recovery. It excludes residential driveways and privately owned lots unless the lot owner requests removal. Law enforcement requests removal, a court orders removal, or there is a verified emergency access requirement. I paused. I did not request it. Law enforcement did not request it. There was no court order, and management has no record of my driveway being fire access. Denise shifted on the laptop screen. David looked toward her. Denise, is that accurate? Denise did not look comfortable, but she answered. Management has not located a map, recorded document, or board resolution identifying Mr. Turner's driveway as common property or a marked fire lane. Carol's face went still. David asked, was there a board vote authorizing this tow? Denise looked down at something off-screen. Management has not located meeting minutes, an emergency vote, or written board approval for a tow from that driveway. For the first time all night, people in the room started whispering. Carol tapped her pen once. The president has authority to act in urgent compliance situations. I nodded. That is what you told the tow driver. Then I pointed to the driver note. This is Rockwell Recovery, S driver note. I read it out loud. Driver asked HOA contact if vehicle was on private driveway. HOA contact confirmed authority and signed removal form. I let the sentence sit there. Then I opened my tablet. Carol's eyes moved to the screen. She knew I did not play the whole video, just the part that mattered. The clubhouse speakers crackled once. Then the doorbell footage filled the small wall screen. Carol's white SUV at the curb, the tow truck rolling in, the driver stepping onto the driveway. Then his voice. Is this HOA property or private property? No one moved. On the screen, Carol stepped onto my driveway. It's under association enforcement, she said. The driver looked at the truck, because it looks like a private driveway. Then Carol handed him the form. I am the HOA president. I authorize it. I stopped the video there. The room stayed quiet in a way silence only gets when people have just heard the part someone hoped would never be played. Linda did not look at Carol. She looked at the screen, at my father's truck, being pulled backward out of our driveway, and her hand tightened around the edge of her purse. I saw it. And, for a second, the whole room disappeared. It was just Linda, the truck, and that empty piece of concrete again. Then Mrs. Alvarez spoke. She told me the same thing she said. Carol turned toward her. Maria, this is not relevant. Mrs. Alvarez did not raise her voice. It is relevant. She told my son his car could be towed from my driveway because it was visible from the street. I asked for the rule. She never sent it. Brandon lifted his hand halfway. She told me. My work van could be removed if I parked it overnight in my own driveway. He said it quietly, like he had been embarrassed about giving in. Until that moment, I moved it because I didn't want trouble. Carol looked at him like he had betrayed her, but he looked tired of being quiet. David Ellis set the tow form down. Carol, did you write common drive/fire access on this form? Carol took a breath. I used the category available on the form to address a recurring violation. That is not what I asked. David said the same sentence Deputy Blake had used. I saw Carol recognize it. David repeated, slower. Did you write that location? Carol looked at the papers, then at the laptop, then at the room. Yes, she said, but the intent was enforcement, not misrepresentation. Paul Sutter, the attorney on speakerphone, cleared his throat. I need the board to stop discussion of intent in open session. That got everyone's attention. He continued, calm and careful. The board should preserve all records relating to this tow, including emails, forms, video, contracts, driver notes, and communications with Rockwell Recovery. I also recommend suspending any towing from residential driveways pending legal review. Carol turned toward the phone. Paul, we are not suspending enforcement because one homeowner is upset. Paul did not raise his voice. We are not discussing emotions. We are discussing risk. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then David Ellis said, I move that all driveway towing enforcement be suspended pending legal review, and that Mr. Turner's violation notices related to this tow be placed on hold. Another board member seconded it. Carol did not. She sat very still, with one seat absent. The 4 voting board members split 3-1. The motion passed. I closed the binder. I had not raised my voice. I had not called Carol a liar. I had not needed to. The tow form did that. The policy did that. The contract did that. The driver note did that. The doorbell camera did that. As Linda and I walked out of the clubhouse, Mrs. Alvarez touched my arm. I am sorry about your truck, she said. I nodded. Thank you. Behind us, Carol was still at the front table, speaking in a low voice to the phone, her clipboard flat on the table now instead of in her hand, for the first time since the tow. She was not using it like a badge. She was looking at it like evidence. And by the next morning, the board attorney had asked Denise to request copies of every document in my binder. By 8:30, the next morning, Denise Porter sent the email. It was short, professional, careful. Mr. Turner, at the request of the association's legal counsel, please provide copies of the documents you referenced during last night's board meeting, including the doorbell footage, tow receipt, tow authorization form, driver note, towing policy, towing contract, and any photographs of vehicle or driveway damage. I read it twice at the kitchen table. Linda stood behind me with a cup of coffee in both hands. Are you sending it? She asked. Not directly, I said. That was the first time in the whole mess I called an attorney. Her name was Rachel Boone. She had a small office above a bank downtown and had helped a friend of mine with a contractor dispute years earlier. She was not dramatic. She did not promise to destroy anybody. She did not say lawsuit in the first 5 minutes. She asked for the timeline. Then she asked for the documents. Then she said, do not send the original video to the HOA yourself. Send me a copy. I'll send a preservation letter and a demand. That sounded exactly like what I needed, not revenge order. By Monday afternoon, Rachel's letter went out to Maple Ridge Estates, HOA, Denise Porter's management company, Rockwell Recovery, and the board attorney. It did not call Carol names. It did not accuse the whole neighborhood. It was 6 pages of dates, records, and plain facts. The truck had been parked on a private residential driveway inside Lot 42. The tow authorization described that driveway as Maple Ridge Common Drive Fire Access. The HOA towing policy did not allow towing from private driveways. The towing contract excluded residential driveways and privately owned lots, unless removal was requested by the lot owner, requested by law enforcement, supported by a court order, or based on a verified emergency access requirement. None of those existed. The doorbell camera showed the driver asking whether the truck was on HOA property or private property. The driver note confirmed Carol had been asked and confirmed authority anyway. Management had located no fire lane record. Management had located no board vote. In Deputy Blake S. incident report, documented the same location discrepancy Carol had tried to explain away. Rachel S. demands were simple: refund the tow fee, reimburse the vehicle inspection and repair estimate, repair or reimburse the scrape damage to my driveway, cancel every related fine and violation notice, confirm that no lien had been filed, and that no lien would be filed while the disputed fines were pending proper hearing procedures. Issue a written correction, stating the truck had been removed from a private residential driveway, not HOA common property, or a marked fire lane. Provide written confirmation that no vehicle would be removed from my driveway without owner consent. Law enforcement request, court order, or council-reviewed emergency access documentation. Preserve all records. Suspend driveway towing unless reviewed by council, and reimburse reasonable attorney fees for the demand letter. Linda read the final page and said, "That sounds expensive," without sounding angry. "That's probably why it works," I said. The HOA did not answer right away. Carol did not to me, to the board. I knew because David Ellis called me 2 days later and read one line from the email after asking if Rachel had already received it. Carol had written, "If the board retreats now, every resident with an ugly vehicle will believe they can weaponize legal technicalities against community standards." David sounded tired when he read it. Then he said, "Mike, I am sorry. I should have asked more questions before this got this far." That apology meant more than I expected. Not because David had to give it, because he was the first person on the board who said the quiet part out loud. They had let Carol act first and explain later. By the end of the week, the HOA insurance carrier had joined the conversation. After that, the tone changed fast. No more hostile conduct. No more matter closed. No more visible violation area. Everything became review, resolution, and risk mitigation. Rachel forwarded me the settlement proposal on a Friday morning. The HOA would refund the $3.85 tow release fee. Rockwell Recovery would waive any administrative charge and issue a written statement that future residential driveway removals required owner consent, police request, court order, or written legal confirmation from the Association-S Council. Rockwell also added a second verification rule for any HOA driveway removal request. If an HOA contact claimed a vehicle on a residential driveway could be towed, the driver had to confirm the property status with dispatch before hooking the vehicle. The HOA would pay for a mechanic to inspect the front suspension and steering. They would cover the scrape repair on the front valance. They would pay a concrete contractor to grind and seal the tow marks on the driveway apron. They would cancel the $250 vehicle fine and the $150 disruptive conduct fine. They would confirm in writing that no lien had been filed against my property for those disputed fines. They would reimburse Rachel S. demand letter fee, and they would issue a written correction. I asked Rachel to send me that page first. She did. It read, "The association acknowledges that the vehicle removed from Mr. Turner's property was located on a private residential driveway and not on association common property, guest parking, or a marked fire lane." I sat with that sentence for a while. It did not bring back the morning. It did not erase Linda standing in the doorway asking where my father's truck was. But it put the truth into writing. And sometimes, after someone has used paperwork to lie about you, the first real relief is seeing the record corrected. Carol refused to sign the correction. That did not stop the board from approving it. For the first time since the tow, Carol's refusal did not control the record. At the next special meeting, driveway towing was formally suspended until the policy could be rewritten. Any vehicle enforcement on private lots had to go through written notice, hearing opportunity, management review, and board approval. No single officer could authorize a tow from a residential driveway. Not Carol, not anyone. At the special meeting, all 5 board members were present. The vote was 4-0. Carol abstained. The motion passed without her. 2 days later, she resigned as HOA president. Her resignation email said she was stepping back because the current environment no longer supports strong enforcement leadership. Mrs. Alvarez forwarded it to Linda with no comment except 3 words. Strong enforcement leadership? Linda laughed for the first time in 2 weeks. Carol stayed in the neighborhood. That part surprised some people. It did not surprise me. People like Carol do not always disappear when they lose authority. Sometimes they stay right where they are, quieter than before, waiting for the world to forget what the record says. But Maple Ridge did not forget quickly. Brandon started parking his work van in his driveway again. Mrs. Alvarez's son brought his car back from his girlfriend's apartment. And every time Carol walked past my house, she looked straight ahead and did not look at the Ford. The truck came back from inspection with nothing serious wrong. The steering alignment was adjusted. The scrape on the front valance was repaired. The concrete marks faded after the contractor sealed the apron. On a Saturday morning, I washed the Ford by hand. Linda brought me a towel and stood at the edge of the driveway. "You know," she said, "your dad would have enjoyed the part where the paperwork beat the clipboard." I smiled. He always did like a clean record. I opened the driver's door and checked behind the seat. The red socket set was still there. I lifted it out for the first time in years. The latch stuck the way it always had. Inside, the sockets were lined up badly, because my father never cared about putting them back in size order. There was still a strip of old masking tape on the inside lid where he had written his name. Bill Turner, black marker, all caps. I stood there longer than I meant to. Linda did not rush me. When I put the socket set back behind the seat, I closed the door gently. Then I looked up at the doorbell camera above the porch. That little camera had been installed because someone stole a package. It ended up protecting something much heavier. Carol thought a tow form could turn my driveway into HOA property. Thought a clipboard could make private concrete into fire access. She thought if she moved fast enough, charged enough, and embarrassed me publicly enough, I would pay the fee, hide the truck, and let the lie sit in the record. But she made one mistake before sunrise. She answered a simple question while the camera was awake, and once the truth was recorded, every paper she signed after that only made the truth louder. A rulebook does not erase a deed. A title does not create authority. A tow form does not turn a private driveway into common property. And a camera does not care who is holding the clipboard. If an HOA Karen has ever threatened your car, your driveway, your gate, or your property like they owned it, tell your story in the comments. And if you believe a deed, a camera, and a calm record should beat a fake HOA rule, subscribe for the next property line justice story.